What's up, family? Welcome back to the Stop Sinking Show, where we go from struggle to flow. I asked my friend a question the other day that I want you to ask yourself. I'll get to that in a minute. Let me frame the reason why I think it's a relevant question. Many of us, including myself, look at other people's lives and only see the glory. Half of the time, we would be glad to exchange our lives with our favorite celebrities or the people that we follow. We look at them like they have it all figured out. We envy or lust for having the things that they have. We covet anything outside of ourselves. And part of that is just a bias created by the close proximity that we have to ourselves versus others. We see the vile, unfiltered ugliness of ourselves, and we are shielded from much of that from other people. That's why it's easier to care for and love someone else than it is yourself, because you see all that ugly. You don't think you're as lovable. So keeping in mind how other people's lives just look so much better than ours, and we don't really know the reality, I asked my friend this question that I will ask you to think about. If you could live the first half of your life like Diddy, or like fill in the blank, insert any famous person that had a fall from grace, even people with small little 15 minutes of fame like the governor of New York, Cuomo, who was a hero, and women were drooling over him during COVID, during all the press conferences that he did, and now he has many allegations against him and people hate him. Everyone from Michael Jackson to Bill Cosby to R. Kelly to Weinstein. And alarmingly, as I'm recalling this, seems like all of these people had some kind of sexual misconduct that ended their whole career. But even if it wasn't that, even if it was like Alec Baldwin shooting someone on set or whatever, the question asks you to think about this. If you could live the first half of your life in a way that most people, including you, would be envious of. I mean, just a few years ago, Diddy was the voice of the vaccines. The government was working with him to reach the masses. He literally has the key to the city. So talking about the heights of success, the man had everything from enjoyment to wealth. It wasn't revealed yet, not to all publicly at least. I'm sure his inner circle knew what a piece of shit he was. So the question is, would you make that trade-off for having all the wealth of experiences only to be stripped of it later in life? My friend's answer, jokingly, I think, was, depends on how bad the consequences are. And I guess that's fair, but reputational damage alone is something hard to come back from, regardless of what your sentencing is. But who cares if you can cry with your billions, right? It seems to me that this playing out in reality, this narrative is quite common. It's the story of Icarus, meaning because of our hubris, our arrogance, because humans forget that they are humans and not gods and cannot violate basic human social constructs, they eventually get too close to the sun, buying their own hype, thinking they are invincible, high on their own power, and eventually the heat from the sun, flying at an altitude they have no business being at because they should have been humble enough to the limitations of reality and whatever you have created within it. No matter how high of a pedestal you get to, you are always subordinate to a higher power and a higher social order. And the minute we forget that, our power leads to our demise. Pride comes before the fall, so they say. And I talked about Clayton Christensen's book, How I Will Measure Your Life, crazy, all the way back to episode 243. He encourages us to think about 3 questions that are fundamental to living a good life. And those 3 questions that can kind of keep you out of this falling from grace, real quick, those questions were, how will I be successful and happy in my career? How will I balance that with the relationships with my spouse, my children, my extended family, and close friends so they too become an enduring source of happiness? And the third, how will I live a life of integrity and stay out of jail? He talks a lot about his Harvard buddies who ended up in jail. Why? Because many of us choose expedience over meaning. Obsessed about the outcome, we are ready to make shortcuts to have, but we don't realize it's what we become that is much more important than what we acquire, what we have. And your pursuit to acquire, in your journey to go and get things, is an opportunity to become. And what you become in that process says a lot about you, because you make a lot of choices along the way and ultimately determines whether you get to keep it. The higher you get, the harder you fall, they say. And although I don't want to believe that entirely, because I think there's a way to carry yourself and to keep this in mind, your future selves, but unfortunately, there is still this undulating nature to the fickle nature of people whose favor you might be trying to court. Like Jay-Z said, first they love me, then they hate me, then they love me again. People will love you one day and hate you another. So you will never please everybody. In some way, we are always falling from grace in someone's eyes. Because the more present you are, the more magnified your every move. And so criticism is expected. You can't avoid criticism if you do anything in life. Also, by no means do I consider having your 15 minutes of fame run out be the same as a hard fall from grace. One is a matter of relevance, the other is a matter of having to right some wrongs that you did along the way. Expect criticism in anything that you do. That's not the cautionary tale here. But here's a thing to consider in your ascent. Power and endurance, never the twain shall meet. The quicker you try to ascend in your thirst for power, the shorter you make the ability for that to be sustained. Endurance is a different game than power, and it's one to be balanced. If you try to get too powerful without keeping longevity in mind, you will reach the heights, and the heat will melt you right back down to earth. This is why intentions matter. If you spend your life and career doing things because you genuinely want to help and give and enhance everyone around you, then just those pure intentions will bring you to stay at heights. Maybe just getting there slower initially, but to rest at places that few only get to visit. Just having pure intentions puts you above 90% of people. And maybe for some of you, the idea of short-term glory has more appeal than the agony of your mundane life. I get it. But for me, I'll play it to keep it. I love you, family. Stay true always. I'll see you on the next show.